Hi, this is Mikhail Belyaev and lecture 6 of our Introduction to Data Science course. Today we have a quite short lecture and we will go through it in more or less a seminar way. But before we proceed, let me start with some recap of the previous lecture and seminar. And one thing I want to highlight is that Scikit-learn is a great library. We have a lot of useful tools there and very nice interfaces. We can work with these interfaces easily. But when we want to fit ensembles of trees, it's better to use an external library. We have three options: XGBoost, LightGBM, and CatBoost. I just want to share with you this blog post, and there is a comparison of these methods and a brief summary that it's not possible to select only one method, so just the winner. All methods are really good, and in some cases you may prefer one or another. Then the next part of this short recap is that for every ensembles of trees we have a set of parameters, and we need to take into account this image and this dependency of total error on model complexity. It's not true for every dataset and every model, but we still can use it when we try to find the optimal set of parameters. So for XGBoost we have several important parameters, and likely the most important ones are max depth. It's the maximal depth of each tree within our ensemble, and estimators, or the number of steps in our gradient descent procedure. And max depth, obviously, when we increase max depth, we increase our model complexity. So we move from this region to this region. The same is true for n estimators. When we increase n estimators, we again move from this area with simple models and high bias or high train error. We move to the right. We increase model complexity. And as you can see, we have a lot of parameters. Some of them are quite technical, like n jobs or n threads, but the others, for example, learning rate, it's the step size in our gradient descent. The other parameters can also be used to control the complexity of our model. But again, two key parameters are max depth and n estimators. Okay, so let us proceed to the actual topic of this lecture, and we will briefly discuss two themes, and the first one is feature selection. And actually there are three main groups of methods, and all of them are pretty simple. Let me start with the first one, so-called filters. The idea behind this set of methods is a really simple one. We want to analyze each feature independently. So we have a set of features and a target variable. Say we have a classification problem and we have some classes. And then we want to find features which are important for this supervised problem. And it's a reasonable assumption that some features aren't important. How can we find these features? The most simplest idea is that we can analyze these features one by one and calculate some quantity to estimate the quality or relevance of this particular feature. And then imagine that we calculated such a score, then we can just select key features with the highest scores. It's a very simple and very straightforward procedure. There are some examples in scikit-learn. You can follow the link and check. And we'll discuss two popular choices for classification problems in a toy example. So we can start with this dataset 1, and here you can see the code for generation, but we can just proceed to the image. This is this plot of our dataset, and we can just select this or this image. So we have only two features, x0 and x1, and we have two classes, blue points and orange points. And also we have some histograms here, and as we can see, we can use this x0 feature to separate our data perfectly. So this is the most informative feature. As for the second feature, x1, there is a slight shift in values of this variable, as we can see from these histograms. So this is an informative feature, but not a really important one. And we can start with this set of methods. The transformer to select k-best features according to a criteria is called select k-best, and we have two criteria. Actually, we have more, but the most important ones are so-called f-classif and mutual information. And you can use mutual information both for classification problems and for regression problems. So here we use mutual information for classification. So the interfaces are straightforward and common for us. We just need to initialize this transformer and then fit it. And as we can see, we specify that we need just k equal to 1, so only one feature. And in this case, we reduce our dimensionality from 2, originally we have 20 points and 2 features, to just one feature. And this is a toy dataset, so we cannot reduce further. And these numbers are scores, so weights for importance of these features. And as we can see, the x1 feature, the second one, is estimated as the most important one. And obviously we want to ask why. The reason is that we use a very simple method, a very simple score. This f-classif actually is just another criterion, and it can be used if the dataset can be splitted into, using only one feature, can be splitted into two classes using just one threshold. And obviously here we cannot select one threshold for this x0 feature to separate blue points from orange points. So in some sense, this criterion is a linear one. And here we need a more complex rule. So for example, we can fit a decision tree to identify this dependency, right? So it's a really simple decision tree with just two splits. But well, now we want just to estimate the importance of feature using some scores, using these type of approaches. We can try a different criteria, and mutual information actually is a more powerful criteria, and we can use it to we can think that this is kind of a piecewise linear model, so we estimate a kind of density of our points from one class and from another class for a different set of thresholds, and then calculate the difference between probabilities for one class and for another. And if we apply this criterion, in this case, you can see that scores are now reasonable. So we have a large score for the first feature, x0, and a small one, but non-zero, for the second one. And it's fair enough that we have a non-zero score for the second coefficient. As I mentioned, we have a slight shift for blue points, as we can see here. Okay, so this is a very simple and straightforward idea. You can use the same the same transformer and slightly different criteria. For example, mutual information regression for regression problems. But obviously, there is a drawback of these types of methods, is that such univariates or one-dimensional stats cannot be used to find some dependencies which involve several features. For example, we can proceed with this second dataset. Again, there is a formula, but we can just switch to the plots. And now you can see that the target variable can be predicted as a linear combination of first two features, x0 and x1, and x2 is again more or less uninformative. We still have the same shift as we had before, but overall we can expect that these two features are important and this one is not important. And if we apply both methods, both simple ANOVA criterion and mutual information, we can see that these univariate methods fail just because we cannot estimate the importance for using this simple assumption. And in this case, we can use the second way of estimate important features. And the idea behind is again a very simple one. We can use a greedy algorithm to add or remove features. So, for example, we can start with the full set of features, then fit a model, usually it's a linear model, and then just remove some unimportant features. And for linear models, we have a perfect way to estimate importance. We can just check the absolute value of the corresponding coefficient. A very important remark is that we need to scale our data first, and then we can use this approach to estimate the importance of each feature, remove one, then re-estimate the model, and again remove the next unimportant feature, etc., etc., etc. So it's an iterative procedure. And again, you can check this scikit-learn example, or we can play with the same data set as we used before. So, as I said, we need RFE. It's so-called recursive feature elimination. So there are different strategies. How can we add or remove features from our linear model? But here, the strategy is probably the most simplest one. We just remove feature one by one, or we can remove more features for every iteration. We can control this number by this additional parameter step. And we need a linear model. It can be a logistic regression, but due to historical reasons, I use a linear support vector machine because this method was proposed to be used with support vector machines. And again, the interfaces are standard, and we just need to fit our RFE, which is initialized with some parameters and an estimator, a linear estimator. I don't scale the data here just because this data is artificially generated, and so we actually do not need to additionally scale it. And then when we transform our features after fitting, we can see from this plot that this transformer keeps the first two features and removed the last one. And also we can see that this order corresponds to importance. So features with small numbers corresponds to important features, and features with large numbers means that they were dropped early. Okay, but well, this method also has a drawback, and obviously we can fit only linear models because it's not clear how can we estimate this feature importance for a nonlinear model. But actually there are some ways. So we can proceed to the third type of methods, and this is so-called embedded methods. And usually this is the method, this is the way to go, because here we can use even a nonlinear model to estimate feature importance. And the overall idea behind this set of methods is that our estimator provides a natural way to estimate the importance. For example, we can consider a linear model with regularization and with L1 regularization. Just to remind you this optimization figure, and that for L1 penalties, the optimal points for a constrained optimization problem, so with a limited L1 norm of our coefficients, for some regularization parameters, this solution will be sparse. So some coefficients will be identical to zero, just not close to zero, but equal to zero. And we can try to fit this model to the same data set. So x0 and x1 are important, and x2 is not as important. And surprisingly, here we can see that our classifier removed the second component, so x1, which seems to be an important one. And as I said during one of the previous lectures, the behavior of L1 penalty sometimes isn't really interpretable. And in this case intends to remove some correlated features, for example. And as a result, we removed an important feature and kept actually a feature which is not really important. This is true for some problems. So, for example, we can remove this shift, so we can make this component, the second one, the third one, x2, to be fully irrelevant. So we do not have this slight shift here, and then we can try again. We can try to refit our model, and well, here, as we can see, we removed two coefficients. And it seems that the complexity of this model is not, I just refitted. So as we can see, we removed this third component, which is now totally unuseful, and keep the first two features. So the goal of this very simple exercise is to show that sometimes you cannot rely on L1 penalty if you want to keep all informative features. if it's okay to keep some informative features, you definitely can use it. Okay, well, and finally, I just want to remind you that you can use some embedded methods for tree-based classifiers and regressors. When you do, there are several ways to calculate importance using trees and subsequently ensembles of trees. And for example, one of the most simplest one is that you can count when you make a split, you improve your objective function, right? And you want to try the best possible split, the best possible feature, and the best possible threshold to get the maximal reduction of your objective function. And then you can count these drops in objective function for each feature, I mean for different leaves, for different splitting points. You can count this achieved reduction of your objective function, and then you can just use a reasonable approach. If one feature provide significant reduction of your objective function in total, I mean if you count all the splits and all the trees in your ensemble, then this feature is an important one. And if your feature provides you a really tiny reduction of your objective function, it seems that this feature can be ignored or can be dropped from your model. And here we have a simple example with some random artificial data set with 10 features and with only 3 informative features. And as we can see, we built a random classifier with some estimators and then extract feature importances from this fitted classifier. And as we can see, as we can expect, we have 3 important features and 7 unimportant ones. But the problem is that if we add some redundant features, in this case, as we can see, the situation is not as clear as it was before. It's similar to the problem with logistic regression, with logistic regression or SVC with an L1 penalty. It's not clear which feature should we select if we have 2 really correlated features. As an extreme example, imagine that you have one measurement in meters and say inches or centimeters due to some errors during data preparation. You have the same quantity measured in 2 different units and added as 2 different features. And it's not clear, should we drop one, so remove it from the model and say this one is not important, or should we keep both and just share the equal importance? And this is a good example that it's not clear. So actually we have only 3 important features, informative features, but also we have 3 additional features which are correlated, and it's not clear how to select only 3. And finally, you can also estimate feature importances for XGBoost classifier as well, with similar logic behind the overall estimation process. So this is the first part, and the second one is that we will try to use these feature selection strategies to analyze a larger dataset, but still a reasonable one.